You know, I'm right. Nick Durst here with the one and only Joe Calabrese. And Joe, I would say it's pretty much a lock to say that you are very excited for our guest today.
A very big lock indeed. Somebody with ample experience, especially in the betting sphere, which we've had some guests on with us previously, kind of more so in the early history of the show, but definitely going to be excited to have him on. He's got the experience previously working at ESPN, the Action Network, and you can catch him hosting You Better, You Bet on Audacy 3 to 7 Monday through Fridays with our guy Nick Costas. He is unbelievably funny. Both of them are entertaining.
Unbelievably
Very
something.
excited to have him on. You're good. Ken Barkley. Ken, welcome to the show. So pumped.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, guys. I like any guest who does their due diligence, was going back through some of your previous episodes. Who did you guys have on? Topics that you guys discussed. It's funny. It was like a lot of guests, like a lot of, notable guests, obviously from, either ESPN, other big mainstream media companies. You guys have had some really cool people on. And then there was also I feel like the origins of the pod were like topic discussions, there were gambling picks. I feel like that were given at some point. What was like the early gambling angle that the show wanted to take?
So we started this podcast right after the pandemic hit. I believe our first episode was released either late March or early April. I believe it was late March. So everything was kind of topical. Obviously, there wasn't too many sports going on because everything was shut down. But if you want really, really good kind of betting angle or picks that Nick and I had very early on, when the NBA was coming back for that playoff run in the Disney bubble.
Got it.
The two teams that Nick and I, we'll give you one apiece. The teams that Nick and I were absolutely on 100% were the Nuggets and the Miami Heat. And Nick could attest to this. I actually ended up picking the Miami Heat to win the East, and they ended up winning the East and going to the finals. And obviously the Nuggets fell short in the Western Conference Finals to the Lakers in the bubble. But we were on those two from the very, very beginning. And obviously that's now 2 seasons away, which is totally ridiculous to think about. But if you're looking for an early angle and a pretty good betting call or something related to that, Nick, you remember I picked Miami?
Of course. How could I forget? You won't let anybody forget.
That's what reminds you of about every 5 minutes, I'm sure, at this point, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was a great call. And unfortunately, I haven't had that measure of success since. So that's why we have
you're pretty good with your WWE bets these days, though.
Oh, we've been a little wrestling too. We've been some pro wrestling. What's our next pay-per-view? What do we have coming up?
We got Crown Jewel at as of this recording, it's less than an hour from now.
Oh, okay. So maybe not so topical for maybe not so good for the listener.
Survivor Series coming up.
Oh yeah, that's usually Thanksgiving time, right? That's usually around then.
Yes.
You'll be there at the Barkley Center.
Oh wow! So it's in Brooklyn too. That's pretty cool. Do they still do like the 4v4? I watched wrestling when I was like 7 years old.
Yeah, they usually do like the 5-5. Now they do like champs versus each other. But it's crazy because WWE is every time you're watching a pay-per-view now, it's like get on FanDuel right now.
Right.
Place your bets. It's kind of crazy to think that.
Right. Since it's like, scripted and everything. It's like pretty crazy. Bet on this predetermined outcome right now. Who's going to win?
That's right. We've come a really long way with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Ken, do you remember when it was that you placed your first bet? And what'd you bet on?
I do. So I'm sure that when I was really young, pools and bracket pools and stuff like that, which are kind of like similar to gambling, obviously betting on sports, March Madness stuff. I did a bunch of that stuff when I was younger, which I'm sure you guys did. I'm sure most of the people listening did as well. But in terms of like depositing money on a site, taking the time to look through the menus, picking a game, handicapping it, and what I wanted to bet on. I was a senior in college. Was I a senior in college? Yes. I went to University of Richmond in Virginia. I had a bunch of friends who kind of casually bet on sports through some offshore websites, which was the only means you could gain access to sports betting at that time other than a local bookie. And even they were not as evolved as they are right now with apps and everything. So it was tough. So it was basically just offshores, or you were out of luck, or you bet with your friend for $20 or whatever you wanted to. And I was home for Christmas break, and it was the college football national, at that time, the BCS national championship game, which was between Texas and USC. And it was one of the most, obviously you guys will remember that game, one of the most hyped games of any sport in history, basically. I mean, I think there was like a 4-hour pregame show for that game. I remember it was like McConaughey was on one sideline, Will Ferrell was on the other sideline for USC. They interviewed them both before the game. Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush in that program against Vince Young and Texas. And I bet USC -7.5. And obviously they had their chances. You could argue they actually could have really covered that number in the game, had a touchdown lead for a lot of it, but obviously Vince Young with one of the most memorable plays in college football history into the corner of the end zone touchdown, as called by Keith Jackson, and Texas ends up winning the game outright. So the first bet that I really remember, I'm putting money on this at the time. I had a part-time job. I was in college. I think I put $200 on it, which was for me, a lot of money to bet on something at that time. Think back to when you're in college, how much money did you have at your disposal, other than
the $200
money from your parents?
$200 feeds you for 3 weeks.
Right. Exactly. That's a lot of Easy Mac. That's a lot of ramen. That's a lot of takeout. That's a lot of that stuff. And it's a lot of gas to have your car go anywhere. It's a lot of that stuff. So bet on USC. Remember watching the game. Remember the feeling of losing, which was, nowadays, just so many years later and so many bets later, you forget what the first one feels like, or what the first 10 feel like, or the first 50 before you really, honestly, it's almost like getting numb to all of the emotional impacts of winning and losing that take place in sports betting. I still remember sitting in the chair, in my dad's office, watching the game, how I felt when Texas won the game. And it's just that pit in your stomach, which I'm sure, honestly, with legalization in America, I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing either for the first time right now or early in their betting career. So yeah, that's a very memorable story. I ended up making a really good bet about a month later on the Steelers in the AFC Championship game against Jake Plummer in Denver. So I could have told that story, which is more kind of glass half full.
That's your first big win.
Bet. Yeah, that was first. Steelers woke up in the morning and thought I was clairvoyant. Steelers money line. I was like, "There's no way this is losing." I think they were plus 135 or something, and put deposit probably twice as much money, because of course I did at that point, because I had no idea what I was doing. Put it all in Pittsburgh and was like, "Oh, I'm actually a genius. I'm actually so good at this." And the answer, of course, is somewhere in between. But yeah, the first bet was that famous USC Texas game.
So you were hooked then. You're home on a break from the University of Richmond, where you're studying journalism. When you're in school there in that program, what was your goal coming out of school? We know you ended up with ESPN, but what were you trying to accomplish there, and where did you see yourself in the next few years coming out of college?
In terms of what I was trying to accomplish, none of this stuff, none of what's actually happened, which is so often probably the case with the people that you interview. They probably wanted to be something totally different, and then a series of events led them to the jobs that they have. I know that's a really common thing for people that I talk to, at least in our space. I really wanted to be a writer. It was the only thing that I ever wanted to do since I was a freshman in high school, basically. I would write a lot in my spare time. I would write for a newspaper. I started the magazine at my high school and ran it with somebody else. Just anything having to do with just not necessarily verbal ability, but just the act of writing in general was just always the thing that I was the most interested in. So Richmond is different from a lot of the big schools. Working at ESPN, you ask other people, where'd you go to school? And they're like, Columbia, Missouri, Northwestern. It's USC, oh, Syracuse. Oh, great. I went to Richmond. So the program at Richmond has basically no broadcast arm to it whatsoever, which is television. Radio was around still, but nobody really knew that it was kind of dying a little bit in its current form, the form that it was in at that time. So this was 03 to 06. So it was all print. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up going there, is because that's what I wanted to do. And I knew people that had gone there. My brother had gone there. I was familiar with the area. And I was all right, I want to be a newspaper reporter or a magazine writer or something. This is what I want to do. And so I'm there and I'm betting on sports and everything. And I, at no time during any of my college time until the day I graduated, did I have designs on doing anything with television, anything honestly with betting, really, I hadn't put two and two together at that point that was even something. I wasn't really passionate about it, to be honest, at that time, because I had so many other things going on in my life. So it was really I want to be a writer. And it's really funny. I would imagine this is akin to, it's asking somebody what do you want to do when you grow up? And the same time, and they're I really want to collect all the CDs in the world. And be I got bad news for you. In the next few years, none of that's going to exist. The entire industry is about to crumble. What do you want to do? I really want to own a Tower Records. Well, that's not going to go so great. I want to own a Circuit City. I got some bad news for you. It's probably not going to go great. So for somebody at that time, 03 to 06, who wanted to be a newspaper reporter, it's well, I got some bad news. They're all about to consolidate under like 3 different corporate umbrellas and lay off everybody. So like, that's not really going to work. But we didn't really know that at the time. It was starting to happen. Everything else that wasn't newspaper was called new media at that time, which is like such a funny thing looking back on it, like the things that are actually all happening everywhere, like billions of interactions every day and everything. That was all called new media. So yeah, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter and thought that was going to be my career path at that point.
So you do end up with that great first job, production assistant in Bristol with ESPN. How did that come about for you? Because not many people are able to start off with ESPN.
I mean, you guys did your homework. You had like the LinkedIn profile. We're scouring and probably run some Google searches. We're doing all kinds of
We
stuff.
we called Moose. And Moose gave us
right, exactly. Yeah, Moose. Right, exactly. So then he said, "Yeah, Ken used to be a production assistant in ESPN. By the way, 8 at Saratoga is very live. Put $20 on it to win." Thanks, Moose. Appreciate that.
Actually, I went to Monmouth racetrack in August.
Oh, that's another great example. Who was giving you winners?
And I tweeted Moose. I said, "Give me some winners for tomorrow. I don't know what to do." He doesn't answer. So we call in Joe, who wasn't there. Joe gave everybody 5 winners in a row. Horse racing is another beast. I mean, it's very different.
Yeah, I have an uncle who used to own like partial portion in race horses.
Sure. Yeah.
My dad has been basically betting on horses in front of me since I was 5 years old.
Sure.
So what happens is you pick up little things, and I've also been to the track a couple of times. So when you're around that, you kind of pick up a couple of things that you know what to bet on. First thing you do is you look at horses breeding, you look at weight, you look at workouts,
second off a layoff,
timings of previous. Yeah, absolutely. So
I
have everything I'm telling you don't already know, but
right. It's funny to hear it again. Yeah,
but I don't bet a lot of
horses.
I do kind of have an affinity for horse racing. So
do you have so you said your dad bet in front of you since you were a young age. Did he have what was his like down the stretch motion? Like, so I have a friend who'll like do like the fake whipping motion,
right?
Get up 3,
but he'll
also
say hit him out loud.
Oh, hit him. Oh, that's always good. Yeah, let's abuse the horse as it's finishing the race. Let's do that. That's always sounds really good.
That's exactly it.
Moose has that too. Moose doesn't. So Mark Moose, this is WFAN host, obviously. Moose doesn't like fully hit, but he kind of just like the hand is just out there. It's just kind of like making motions.
It's pumping.
Yeah, it's just we're just trying to generally urge the horse to cross the finish line. That's basically all we're trying to accomplish.
I think that's better than the whip.
So back to you with ESPN. Production assistant.
Oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, production assistant, because that has nothing to do with whipping motions. So basically I graduate college and was like, yeah, like let's get into that newspaper industry. Let's accomplish that. Applied for like 200 jobs over the course of 2 weeks, either leading into graduation or right after. Got probably 125 no replies and 75 no's basically, or maybe 10. We'll give you an unpaid internship, but you have to move to like Wyoming or whatever and like learn the ropes, that kind of stuff. So was left with some pretty meager options in terms of print journalism. As anybody can tell you, like in all 3 phases at that time, so radio, TV, and writing, the unpaid internship was like the scourge of the college graduate trying to get into the industry. Like it was really, for a lot of people, their only entry point to get part-time or full-time employment was like, you had to work for no money somewhere. So I did a lot of those in college at a lot of different places, but I was not really interested in that anymore. Once I graduated, I felt like I'd done those things and like, I'm prepared enough. Like I would like at least part-time work that pays some money. I don't think that's crazy to think that. So I was like, all right, print, maybe not going to work out. Let me try. I had done some sports radio work, very like shallow, not intense, not really learning the ropes at a radio station. There's an ESPN radio affiliate in Richmond that had like one show that was on. I'd done an internship there. So I was like, all right, let me just put some feelers out for like radio. I could like produce, I could do whatever. Small markets, any place that nobody would want to live. Great. Nobody's hiring at all. Okay, cool. All right, well, that's like 500 jobs down applied for that are not open. And as a sort of like, while I was doing that, as a just absolute like shot in the dark kind of last ditch thing, I was on ESPN's jobs. And I'd always, like anybody my age, I'd grown up obsessed with SportsCenter and ESPN. The brand was still insanely cool. Even at that time, it was starting to lose that luster, but it was still like such a cool place. And had such like this, aura around it, basically, where it didn't matter. You would just, of course, you would want to work there. or why wouldn't you want to work at ESPN? It's the coolest place in the world. It's funny that I feel like nowadays probably nobody would feel like that. I'm not even sure I would feel like that, but at the time, coolest place on earth. So I applied for 2 jobs at the same time. Production assistant, which is just an entry level, anybody who doesn't work in TV. It's basically just, that's where you start. And it basically means you do anything they ask you to do that involves anything related to a TV show. It could be running the teleprompter. It could be like, honestly, at some places, it's literally like fetching things and being almost a runner, which is like really a lower level position. But most of the time it's like, you know, producing some video elements for shows and doing some really low level stuff. So I applied for that job, and I applied to be a researcher, which I was like, oh, I know a lot about sports. And like, and now I'm thinking back on it, and I'm just like, everyone probably applied for that thinking they know a lot about sports. Like, you know, we all think we know a lot about sports, and then maybe we're not actually as great as we think we are, but I felt like I knew a lot of stuff. So I applied for both, and then had gone through this 2-month process, nobody hiring, no jobs. What am I going to do? Like, I'm going to have to go get some like real work that's not sports somewhere. Like, this is going to suck. Like, like basically just thinking about like, what industry can I reliably work in? It's almost like an actor who's waiting tables until they get their big break, right? You're just trying to figure out, where am I going to go and do this? Like, am I going to like tutor people? I've been like a writing tutor in college to pay some bills. Okay, cool. So I'm at the supermarket one day, it's in August, and I'm at the grocery store buying, at that time, probably something insanely unhealthy because I had terrible eating habits. I was probably buying like Red Baron pizza and ice cream or something, but I'm in one of the aisles, and my phone rings, old school cell phone, flip phone. And I answer, hey, hello. And they go, hey, it's blank blank from ESPN. Would you like to come interview for a production assistant? And I was like, yes, I would like to do that. Yes, like I can get in my car right now. I'm in South Carolina. I can be in Connecticut in whatever, 13 hours. So we set up a time for that. I hang up the phone. Phone rings like 30 seconds later, maybe like a couple minutes. I pick it up. Hello. Hey, it's somebody totally different from ESPN. Would you like to interview to be a researcher? And I go, hey, I like just got off the phone with the other guy, like the other guy from, and he goes, like, what are you talking about? And I go, no, like the production assistant guy. And apparently they both like literally independently of each other that day had chosen to call me to set up stuff. So that was kind of like the big break, basically, is just my resume on top of a pile, got to somebody who mattered, who whatever, and got the break. So a little bit of a long-winded story there, but like, you never really know.
So did you go interview for both jobs at the same day?
I did. Yeah. I used to keep, so research, production assistant, the interview's lame. Like, you go, they ask you some generic sports questions. If you're not an idiot, you're going to get the job. It's getting the interview is the really tough part. And like, just the randomness of being drawn to get the interview. Once you're there, I like literally left the production assistant interview, and I called my dad, and I just go, oh yeah, like I got that. Like, there's no way I didn't get it. And I wasn't even that confident going in. I was actually scared to death. And I was like, oh no, like this, I got it, don't worry. So researcher is way more fun because there's a series of tests you have to pass. And I used to keep the written test because I would just show it to other people because they'd be curious, like, yeah, maybe I could be an ESPN researcher. Like, I know a lot about sports, and you would show it to them, and then tell them about the phone test, which would be the second part. The written test is how fast you can look up stuff, actually. So it's just, here's 20 names of athletes. Make sure they're all spelled right. That's one of like the 10 parts, and you have an hour to complete the entire thing. So it's like fact checking, making sure like everything looks okay. They give you an old school NBA box score. You have to find the 2 mistakes in it, like that kind of stuff, where it's not like in 1961, who won the gold medal, whatever. And then if you do well on that, you get the phone test. And this is where I really bombed. This was not good. So they call me on the phone and they go, rank your favorite sports topics, your sports from like 1 to 5, and of all the sports. So I go, all right, like NFL 1, college football 2, college basketball 3, whatever. And they go, okay, so you have NFL is like the thing you know the most about. I go, okay. They go, question 1, name 10 legendary players in the NFL from the 1930s. And I just go, all right, I'm gonna go. I'm good. Like the Costanza, like, all right, that's it for me. See you later, everybody. So I did go through with the rest of it. I was like, you fudge your way through some BS two answer thing. Okay, cool, whatever. Let's go to college basketball. And this was the only one that I got right. I think of the ones that we asked before I was just like, look, like this isn't for me. And it was what school ended UCLA's whatever it was, like 108 game winning streak. Do you guys know the answer to that one? It was like with like Kareem and Bill Walton, I guess, and Wooden and all those guys. I remembered hearing this because it was like on an ESPN program actually at one point. So Notre Dame, who was coached by Digger Phelps, who actually like ended the winning streak. So I got that one. I was like, maybe. And then they asked me something else impossible. And I had no idea. So anyway, took the entry-level production assistant job when that door closed fast. It slammed pretty hard. Took the production assistant job, drove up to Connecticut like 2 weeks later, got a crappy apartment, bought the largest TV I could possibly afford, probably was where all my money went, and then started at ESPN like the next week.
So starting with our first ever guest, Nan Verk, and all the way through all of our ESPN guests, people who worked there at some point, they always have good stories about the ESPN cafeteria. We've had people get picked to be on air because they were sitting in the cafeteria. We've had, people interacting with staff members, maybe some thieves stealing some candy. Give us your best ESPN cafeteria story.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I can tell you, see, like the good stories are like the bad stories. Like the good stories are the ones that actually like people can't really, well, okay. A guest that you've had enough ESPN guests on the show, I can tell the story. A guest that you've had on the show before is the most notorious thief of things in the history of the company of ESPN. And it's to the point that, so it used to be the cafeteria now, and this was, I think it got finished a year before I left the company, is like brand new, much more modernized. Like it's, there's all different kind of lines. I don't even need to describe it as boring, but the old cafeteria was pretty like, it's kind of just like family stylish. There's just like pots of stuff out. You can walk on, like take whatever you want. It's kind of buffet style, I guess would be the right way to put it. And there's a salad bar, whatever. And that's about it. And this person who you've had on the show before was notorious in that I was a production assistant. I was 23. And all of us knew that this person was the biggest thief in ESPN at the cafeteria. And they would walk along with like basically a spoon and they would just eat everything in the line. And then they would just leave. Like they wouldn't even, like, I'd like you fill up your plastic container, your cardboard container, whatever. You go to the register, you pay. This is how normal things are done. This is how normal people behave. And yet this get like, we would see him and be like, oh, there he is again. Like it's just, helping himself, get some of that rice, get some cornbread, get one of those burgers. Okay. Like just try sampling everything. I've never even heard of someone doing this in a corporate environment. And yet, I guess that's one of like the magical things about ESPN is that such a new company. It's this blending of all these different people. So that would be, I could tell other stories about stuff that was.
That's great.
I mean, there are shows that have been created at the cafeteria. The rumor, and I would say rumor, but I'll say rumor, but it's like pretty confirmed. But the rumor is basically like the idea for the Michael Smith Jamel Hill SportsCenter 6 was basically like the origin story of that was that the person who thought of that idea was with the two of them at the cafeteria and they like brainstormed it and thought of it. And then like the next day it was put into action basically. So like, it's not just rice thievery that takes place at the cafeteria. There's also like actual creative brainstorming that takes place. Sometimes, I think a lot of people probably attest, like that's actually a pretty good incubator to come up with stuff like that.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine. So you were there, obviously, like many PAs, you're looking to ascend, you become an associate producer. Later on, you're a highlight producer. For you, you're working on all these different shows. You did Baseball Tonight, you did SportsCenter, you worked Olbermann, you did SVP. For you, what was the most enjoyable show to work on? You had a big role, of course, in Bad Beats, which is a huge segment, which everyone looks forward to now. But of all those different shows, what was kind of the most fun for you? And the biggest differences for you working with Olbermann versus Scott Van Pelt?
Do you think there might have been differences there? You think there might have been?
I can imagine. There was a lot less.
A lot of differences.
What do you
mean? Just cannot stop tweeting dog pictures. It's just like enough already. How many dogs?
I thought you were going to go somewhere else. Okay.
Well, there's other. I know we were going too, and I agree.
Yeah, and it gets worse and worse every year. My experiences on the two shows were completely opposite. So I met Keith Olbermann once. So I worked in Connecticut. He and the rest of the show staff were stationed in Manhattan in New York City. And the show was from like the Times Square studio and everything. So they had some office space there. The actual producer of the show and a couple members of the production staff and Keith would work in that building. Keith would have like a car service that would bring him in. Everybody else would go to the office space. They would do the show from there. They would leave. That was their day. But they had no access to video there, or no means of producing anything of any substance to put on the show in addition to just Keith in the studio. So, okay, we got Keith in the studio, we got cameras on him. What are we running? Like what video are we putting on the show? Like if one of Keith's things is he's obviously like a legendary highlight reader, like one of the best of all time, if not the best of all time. And so he wanted highlights to be a big part of the show. And we developed these 2 segments, which I believe the producer of the show nicknamed Keith Lights, which was always one of my least favorite branded titles of anything that's ever existed. But the goal was laudable, which was these 2 really long segments of highlight packages of basically every game that took place that day. Keith was really interested in that. And he was really interested in that. So I really wanted to work on the show once I knew that it's like, wait, I'm like solely in charge of producing every highlight, picking everything that he's going to read every single night for every highlight. That's just me. Like, okay, cool. I want to take that job. So I met him once, and then I never talked to him the entire rest of the history of the show because I'm in Connecticut and he's in New York. So I'd get emails sometimes, like very, very like short, terse. Like I was one of 60 people he was in the process of emailing at that time. And yet, despite that, insanely enjoyable show to work on because he's just really good at his job. He's just so good at his job that it overcomes any friction that could possibly exist because of whatever work habits, however you want to call the interaction between him and everybody else. It's just, just one example real quick. So, I was in charge of all the highlights. I had a team of 2 people that worked under me. We would produce the highlights for every single game that would air in the show. World Series, he had this idea like, well, how about I write copy like into and out of all these video clips for like the World Series game that was taking place while the show was on the air. So we would come on at 10 o'clock. That'd be like the 6th inning. And I'd be like, in my head, I go, okay, this is like a fun idea that he really wants to like tell this story, and we'll cut a couple of video clips and we'll almost make it this like Daily Show monologue kind of opening. So it's him on camera and a lot of video. How is he going to do this? He wrote it in the commercial breaks. Wow. He would just write it and then he would come back and do the show again. And I'm just like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like you could give me 20 years of training. I wouldn't be able to do like both things as well as he does them. So that like sort of majesty that he brought, the gravitas that he brought to the show, that was the cool part about that show. Van Pelt, amazing also, but in a completely different way, skewed more towards like fun, I would say. Skewed more toward like, I enjoyed working on Olbermann maybe more than any show. I had more fun working on Van Pelt than any other show because whether it's Scott or Stanford Steve or the producer, Tom DeCordy, who's like now moved on to work on other stuff, but was the original producer of the show, other like cast members that have interacted with the show. The original crew was essentially like a best of the best of each position at the company. So like, we want a researcher. Okay, here's the best researcher. We want an associate producer. Here are the 2 that are literally about to be promoted. One of them is the current producer of the show. Okay, we want a highlight person. Here's me. Okay, we want, whatever. So it was like, it was this dream team. And as a result, that first year, before everybody obviously moves on to bigger and better things, like the creativity is just insane. You put that many smart people in one room, every single element that still lives on the show, because for the most part, the show hasn't changed, been the same for like 3 or 4 years with only a couple additions. Every single thing that people like about the show was developed in that first 3 to 4 weeks when you had that many people in the room, and Scott, who's very creative and smart, and Steve. So like, Best Thing I Saw Today, which was the opening, Bad Beats, which was Scott's idea, and then I just produced the montage for it and then cut it every week. But it was his original idea. Like, I want to do a segment every week with gambling beats in it. Best Available Video, Oh No, like all these things. These were all like little inklings of ideas that got developed into what's become the franchise elements of the show, basically. So 2 totally different show experiences. Like Olbermann, I loved working on it. I loved working on it despite the fact I interacted with the host 0 times, basically, in the history of the show, yet everything fit together and clicked and worked really well. And I loved working on Van Pelt because it was the complete opposite. I still will message or text with Scott to this day, and Steve, and they've come on the show with me to do gambling talk before. So just 2 totally different experiences, but both still really fun.
So I wanted to ask, because the whole betting gambling industry for a really long time was kind of a taboo topic. I think a lot of companies and broadcasts would shy away from it. And now we know it's just a domino effect. It's only a matter of time before state by state, boom, 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 this state will legalize it, this state will legalize it. So at the time, was there any pushback from somebody you were working with directly or higher ups regarding stuff that you were doing content wise with gambling and getting that on the air? Because again, it's like I said, it's one of those things where it was kind of an untouched topic until it really wasn't. And now the ball is totally rolling with that industry.
Right.
Here.
The horses are out of the barn, I guess is the right way to put that, right? There's you turn on
Sure.
NFL game day morning, like the NFL's official pregame show, side and total are listed on every single topic bar.
Right. Every major sports team now has a partnership with DraftKings or FanDuel or BetMGM now. And, it's just, So yeah,
It's
I was
crazy.
curious about pushback and stuff, and especially with the higher ups there.
Yeah, so I'll tell you one story and then we'll do just the pushback stuff. So prior to Van Pelt starting, there was no gambling content really anywhere on the show except for Chris Berman would do the 2-minute drill on Fridays, and you would have the parentheses when he would pick the game with the point spread on it. That was like the only point spread reference that existed. Then College Game Day started doing like a little bit. They have like obviously the Bear, Chris Felique on there. The guys on the panel all are very aware of point spreads and bet, et cetera, et cetera. So like they all know what's going on. So they started doing a little bit. But I was betting for a couple of years prior to Van Pelt, not very casually, had no idea what I was doing, similar to basically, a lot of the casual bettors now. And I would have it open at work and managers would like scold me if they ever caught, like I had to be really like secretive about it. You do it on your phone, you go out, basically where people take like cigarette breaks and you make bets there. If it was ever, I had it one time, it was open on my computer. I had 5 dimes open, this like old offshore that you can't access in America anymore, and was betting NBA player props. And a manager like absolutely reamed me for like basically was just like, can't ever have that open here, like da, da, da. And that goes into what you're talking about, right? Which is, it used to be just like absolutely the most taboo thing in the world. Probably a year later, 2 years later, I was working on Van Pelt, and I mean, I'm having the Bad Beats production meeting right after the normal production meeting, and it's just like, did everybody see this? This was so awesome. Here, let me look up something on my phone. What's that number tonight? We're all talking about games that we want to bet on. So yeah, just completely flipped kind of what was possible. And I think Scott was a huge part of that there, about being like, look, we all do this. Can we just, which is similar to kind of how the NFL's the approach, like finally they're like, all right, look, everyone's doing this. It's safe for us to come in because we're the last people in. It's okay for us to do this. Like Scott's like, look, everybody's doing this anyway. Can we just take it and like actually make it smart? Because if we're just gonna like tiptoe around it and pretend and make veiled Brent Musburger references and Al Michaels references, like cool, that's like cute, but that's just so honestly like kind of lame now, because it's like, let's just have the conversation. Like, why can't we just have the conversation? Why do we have to keep pretending when we have this ability to have a show that has gambling stuff on it? So we would get pushback in the early days of the show all the time. Number one, from the NFL, who didn't want us doing anything still related to their sport. Every other sport, I never heard anything. And I was not the producer or the person in charge of the show, but I was like, a couple rungs down. And I produce all the video. I would hear if it was like, don't do NFL. And with Bad Beats, it was always don't do NFL. It was do anything else. Do college basketball, do college football, which is funny because you would think amateur athletics, like, how is that not off limits with NFL? It's like, it makes no sense whatsoever. But it's like, do college football, do college basketball, do NBA. Never NFL. Don't do NFL. We were always told that forever and ever and ever. And now we've at least like, even watching the show now, it's like a tiny part of the show from a gambling standpoint. It's referenced, Caesars, which is I think the ESPN book that they use, whatever the partnerships are now. Like they'll reference those odds for MVP or to win, quote unquote.
And they have their own betting show, Daily Wager.
They do. They do have their own betting show, but that show, the very little I know about it, because it developed right after I left, basically, and I kind of know the person who runs the show and everything, and I know the producer a little bit. They had a ton of, as you can imagine, like if we had issues, they're going to have the same issues for the most part. Like, what can you show? The biggest thing that people don't think about, what can you show video of? And there's permissions that are attached to all that stuff. Like, if you're going to talk about pro football gambling, the NFL is probably not going to let you show 20 seconds of Patrick Mahomes throwing touchdown passes and 15 seconds of this. And there's all kinds of awful red tape that we don't have to get into that goes into that. So sometimes if you're watching Daily Wager, you're watching a show, especially on conventional TV, and you're wondering like, why are they showing that thing? Or why are they like not, why does it seem like they're not being very direct? It's probably because they can't be direct. So yeah, just a couple examples there.
And you got to always love the graphics when it says New York A.
Oh yes, New York A, LAN, LAA. Now with the Chargers and Rams both playing in Los Angeles. Crazy.
Just tremendous. So after ESPN, you finally get to do what you were hoping to do 12 years prior, and that's write. Do a little writing for the Action Network and bang the book. What was that process like for you? Because you're in a TV mindset for almost 12 years, and all of a sudden you're going back to writing. How was that switch for you?
Incredibly risky, honestly. Like, that's the best way I can describe it. I was making really good money, like very comfortable. Disney is an awesome big company to work at in terms of like benefits and insurance and retirement and
perks. Did you ever go to Disney World for free?
I didn't have kids at the time. My daughter, our first, was born 6 months before I left the company. So I never got to like, let's do the family vacation, but you would get a certain amount of free passes that you could like print out and give to people. And it was, I mean, you were the most desirable person if you had 6 passes, if you had 4 passes. Hey man, can I get those passes? Can I get 2 passes? Like, it's just, who has them? We need them. That was like obviously a big part, but I mean, that's a really good company to work at. Obviously, like there have been layoffs since then. ESPN's still really profitable, but maybe it ends up getting sold to somebody. Like, who knows what the future is? But just in terms of like the benefits of working there, awesome. Like, I mean, stuff that you would just like you would dream about if you worked at other companies. So okay, like I'm in this cushy spot, but I'm also probably never really going to get promoted. Like, people are starting to get laid off. The management structure is really shrinking. I had kind of like alienated or like sort of like pissed off basically a couple of people that ended up being above me in really key roles. So like, this wasn't going to be good like 5 years, 10 years down the road. I'd probably be doing the same job forever until I got laid off. That would probably be my career path. And it would have been a good job. And I was making really good, like it would have been fine, but it just didn't have a future. And some of that was my fault. And some of that I feel like was decisions that were made by the company. It was both occurring at the same time, which is true, I think, for most things. So I was like, all right, do I want to take a really big risk? And I think you talk to a lot of people that have like a side hustle, or they have something they're thinking about developing. They want to start their own company, whatever it is, start their own podcast, probably like what you guys do, I'm guessing. Like, anybody who has that thing, and a lot of us have one now, there's always that moment where you go, okay, like, let me do the work on this. Is it worth it? Or am I at a place in my life where the side hustle can become the main thing? Because I hate the main thing so much, like the current main thing. And so I was like not seeing my daughter that much, who was like 6 months old, 3 months old. I was working like 12, 13-hour shifts. I didn't really like the work as much anymore, even though the benefits were really good. And I'm like, all right, it might be big risk time. Like, we had saved really well. We put ourselves in that position where we could do that, where a lot of people I know aren't in that spot to do that. And like, it takes a long time to get there. Obviously, I worked at ESPN for 11 years. Like, you really got to plan this out when you want to make one of these moves. But I felt like it was big risk time. I felt like gambling was going to grow a ton, and betting content was going to grow a ton. And even if I took the crappiest job in the world that didn't pay very much, and that is not a knock to the 2 places you just referenced, but even if I took a crappy job that didn't pay a lot, that was a step toward something that could be really awesome, because like, now my name is in the space. Now people know that I work in that area. I still have pretty good contacts from ESPN. I'm going to make more contacts, obviously, working at whether it was Action Network or some other places. Like, we need to get the ball rolling on this, because you could see it growing by the week, by the month, by even just the number of Twitter accounts that were giving out picks, which was the origin of everything. Like, that space now, there's got to be like 1 million Twitter accounts that give out picks. I can't imagine them trying to all fight over each other and like scrap for just that little bit of clout, right? For just that little, like, give me my first 1,000 followers. It's got to be just an absolute minefield now, like, just, like the jungle, basically. It's like, I mean, everybody's just trying to devour each other just to get a little bit of recognition, a little bit of credit, start the ball rolling on whatever they want to do. So it was risk time. And I literally, within like a week, like told the vice president of the company, who I like was, had an okay relationship with, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I have an offer. Okay, like, let's talk about it for a couple of days. And then by the end of the week, I actually was like, he was like, yeah, like the things that you're asking for to stay, or like, whatever you want to do, you can't do those. And I said, okay, well, I quit. And not with any anger or anything. I was like, okay, like, I think it's time for me to quit. Like, okay, great. And just, that was it. Like, snap of the fingers, don't work at the company anymore. And that's tough, I think, for a lot of people, because it's security versus risk. It's just like, is your job, do you need it because it's secure, no matter how much you hate it, no matter how much whatever, you just need it because, like, you need the paycheck, of course, you need the health insurance, you need all the things that go along with it. You're scared about the future if you end up picking this new thing. What if you pick an industry like owning a Tower Records, and then Napster happens, and then your thing falls apart? Of course, there's risk involved in any decision. There's risk involved in going for a drive every single day, but you just try to figure out, okay, like, do the kind of the cost benefit analysis in your head. Am I going to be a lot happier? Can we sustain this? Like, what, really just kind of play it out. And it was, for me at least, I'll just say it was a no-brainer for me, even though there was a ton of risk involved. The first job I took, really, like, quote unquote full time, was writing for Action Network. I probably made 20% of what I made at ESPN per year, like, very little, but it was like worth it, because I felt like if I could get back to my original salary in 2 years, because this is going to scale so well, no problem. And then the scaling from there is obviously exponential versus staying at ESPN. So you had to take a short-term hit in order to obviously have kind of a long-term reward. So that's kind of how that came about.
Yeah, just like betting, you got to put a lot down to win a lot. So you bet on yourself, or
make a lot of bets, right? If you think you have an advantage, just like, you got to like make the bets, like if you think you have an advantage, obviously.
Yeah. So then in the summer of 2019, spring of 2019, then at the time, Entercom, now Audacy, they decide, you know what, we're gonna do sports betting ads and reads every single chance we get. We might as well make our own type of show here.
Might as well.
How did you hear about that and you approach them, or did they come to you because of the Action Network there?
So this, I don't think I've ever told this story before, so this will be an exclusive for you guys. And it's like kind of a personal story, but it'll be good. Action Network started to downsize about a year after I started writing for them. And I don't think any of this is like, this is totally fine. I can tell the story. So they started downsizing like a year in. And as part of that, I'm pretty sure they identified, my guess is, they identified like people that they thought could really like had big followings, could produce like a lot of content. They kind of, I think, identified their team, basically of people. A lot of those people are still there. I like them a lot. I still talk to them. We have them on the show. A lot of the people that still work there are awesome. They're really good people and they're very smart. They kind of, I think, picked their team. Like, let's streamline this. Let's cut it down a lot. Who do we really want? I was not one of the people that they really wanted. So, and I hadn't worked there for very long. I wasn't producing probably like the best stuff for them. And I didn't have any like radio pod experience at that time. So I didn't have a lot of other tools to give, like, I can write for you, but like, can I do on-air stuff? Can I record and produce my own podcast? Like, I didn't really know how to do that stuff to the degree that they would have wanted a professional to be able to do it. So I wasn't on the team. And so I get this call. I was driving home from Starbucks with my son, who was at the time like 3 months old, maybe something like that. Yeah, he was born in February. It was June. And, so we don't need to do names. Somebody from the company called me and basically said, we're not paying you anymore starting right now. And I said, okay. And kind of just like, I think I ended up probably treating the phone call not as professionally as I probably could have. But honestly, even in retrospect, I probably could have been more unprofessional, to be honest. So I was like, all right. So I hang up the phone and I just like stand there. And the best part is like my son is just like staring right at me. And I'm like, all right, just like, don't get upset. Like, don't swear, don't do anything. Like, don't just just be cool, be good about it. And at the time, so okay, like now we talk about risk. We talk about what could happen when you take that job. Okay, so what do I have income stream wise? I have Action Network, which is dead. I have a couple other freelance things, which are still working, but don't produce a lot of money versus that. I have a book that I was writing, a college football preview book to be an Amazon ebook. And I was like almost done with it. I was like 95% finished with it. This was in June. And I go, all right, what do I want to do here? I was like, all right, I'll keep doing the other freelance stuff. I want to finish this book and I want to just see if I can do this. And if this book is good, then I'm going to write a lot more books. And this is what I want to do anyway. Like, okay, that's the plan. Let's see if we can generate any income from this. Now we're like big risk. Now we're like very little safety net, like really got to try to like figure it out. So about 3 weeks later, I'm in the parking lot of the West Farms Mall in West Hartford. And I get a phone call from, at that point, the producer of what was going to be You Better You Bet, basically saying like, we really like your stuff. I knew this person. He goes, do you want to be on the show? Do you want to host the show? And so again, like think about along the way, anybody who's like thinking about doing stuff like this or have gotten unlucky and your thing hasn't worked out, anybody, even if they wouldn't tell you those stories, there's so much luck involved in all of these processes. Like everybody now, like I'll get messages being like, you're so smart, your stuff's so good. Like I like your numbers, all this flattery type stuff. If I don't get the call from ESPN to go work there when I'm 18, if I don't get this call to do the show, and cool, you could argue some of that was, well, you were really good at those places. So like that made you stand out. Like you had to be ready when the opportunity came, you had to network, you had to know the person who was going to produce the show so that they would call you. Great. But like the paths that are possible if that phone call doesn't take place, a lot of them are not very good. Honestly, that's like part of risk. And I could end up working somewhere else right now, but that's not how it's worked out. But luck is involved in all this stuff, I think, for a lot of people, even if they won't admit it. So got the call to work on the radio show. Nick, who you guys know, Nick Costos, had already been locked in as like the main host. We jokingly call him the primary host, and they were looking for co-hosts. So it was me and several others, basically ended up splitting days, and then basically just like took that opportunity and ran with it to be kind of what it is right now. So a little bit of a long-winded story there, but just, I think just for people listening, like obviously sports, entrepreneurship, betting, these are all things people are interested in that listen to your show. Yeah, like there's just, you wish there wasn't as much luck involved as there is, because so many things that involve your career are probably in the hands of other people. Like they have to decide that you get the things that you want. And then as you get older, you get to decide the things that other people behind you get when you make those decisions. That's just kind of networking. It's kind of the way it goes, even if it sucks, even if you wish you were totally in command of everything that you got to do. So yeah, honestly, a couple lucky breaks and a lot of hard work, but honestly, without the lucky breaks, none of that stuff happens.
I always say this, and I apply it to sports, but I think it applies to real life and career too. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And for
Sure.
you, that's very, very prevalent. I do have a question for you.
Sure.
How did you get your nickname?
So this is, left the company like 2017, 2018, ESPN. About a year before I left, working on Van Pelt. Stanford Steve and I became like pretty good friends just from working on the show. We would talk every day when we got there. We both bet a ton, so we would like obviously have very common interests. So I'm sitting around in their conference room one day, and he's there, and I would give him some college football things that I liked every single week, just like bets that I really liked. And he goes, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Do you have a Twitter account?" And I had created one just because I mentioned the taboo ESPN history. So I had a Ken Barkley Twitter account. I think the handle on it was Bark of America. And I think it actually still exists, but it's like, again, because everyone did the same thing when they were creating Twitter accounts. Stop laughing. I see both of you laughing right now. It's like creating an AOL instant messenger screen. I mean, like what was your name? And you're like, Awesome Guy 69. It's like, okay, all right, thanks, appreciate that. So, so I think the name still exists, but I had that, and that was like me, my friends, normal Twitter activity. And then I remember being yelled at repeatedly for betting. So I was like, well, I can't tweet from an ESPN employee profile about sports betting all the time. This was several years earlier. Like, can't do that. That's really taboo. So I created this account in like 5 seconds just to be able to engage with people about betting, really just to follow people or occasionally tweet at them questions because I just didn't know a lot at that point. And I had to come up with this name like off the top of my head, like this was in 5 seconds, whatever. And I'm Locky Lockerson, whatever, like something to throw away, stupid, like who cares? No one's ever going to see this, and created it. So fast forward a couple years later, I'm in that conference room with Stanford Steve. He goes, "Do you have a Twitter account?" I go, "Well, I have this betting one that I don't really use." And he goes, "Well, what's the name?" And I go, "Locky Lockerson." And he kind of laughs, and he's like, "All right, here's what we're going to do." He goes, "I'm going to tweet from my account every like Thursday that I got this pick from like my Vegas insider, and it's going to be your account." Like my guy, excuse me, my guy in Vegas at Locky Lockerson says bet Oregon, like bet Oklahoma -14 or whatever. And he did that for like even just 2 weeks. I had 2,000, 3,000 Twitter followers, and like everybody needs that initial boost to get like into the atmosphere of what's happening. That was mine. So the name was not planned. Didn't think this was going to happen, but obviously a little help from Steve made it happen.
Incredible story.
Unbelievable.
And then that definitely got you off the ground. No doubt about it. Now I want to ask you a question. Maybe you kind of already answered this with the transition in the career,
Sure.
but what was your I'm right moment? So what we mean by that is somebody either in your personal life or career is telling you, "Hey Ken, you gotta do this way. This is the only way to do this." And you kind of said, "You know what? I'm going to do this my way, and ultimately you'll see why I'm right about that."
Right. So my parents are very risk averse people. They are, my dad is a child psychologist who's gone on to have like a very like famous career and everything. And my mom was a homemaker, was in elementary education, and stopped working to take care of my brother and I and raise us. So they are very risk averse. They don't bet. They don't watch sports really. They would never be caught dead in a casino and would tell anybody else not to go into one. They saved every penny. Like they are like their journey is like they were broke and now they are wealthy because of like all of these great habits that they developed. So they are extremely risk averse. The concept of betting is something that not only are they like indifferent to, but probably actively would campaign against. If I was just like, "Hey, you know what I want to do? I want to be a professional roulette player." They'd be like, "Well, like maybe let's reconsider this a little bit." So I think early on when I talked about the risk versus security thing of leaving ESPN, obviously their voices, and they didn't say don't do it, but I think there was a lot of concern. My mother especially, who is like the most wonderful woman in the whole world, but like every conversation was just like, like you just hear the anxiety and there'd be noises like in her voice, which you'd be like, "I don't really think that's a good idea." Like just really maybe don't do that. And even I often feel like this when I probably left the company. I'm sure there were a lot of people who, like you have your coworkers who they're like your friends, but like when you don't work there, they're not your friends. So like it's really just they're your friends because you all work in the same place. And like so many very nice people still work there. But I'm sure a lot of them were probably looking at each other being like, "What? Like what an idiot. Like what is he doing? Like what is like typical Ken flying off the handle doing something stupid, you know? Like I'm sure because of so many different types of people out there, obviously, I'm sure that opinion was passed around a little bit, maybe by some of my bosses. It's like what? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like why would he do something like that? So, you know, when you know that there's like that's kind of din in the background of people saying that, obviously my opinion is always it can't affect your decision making. Like you are in control. You solely are in control of your happiness, but really like your mood and like how you feel every day. So like you're the only one that's going to be able to like if you want to be in a bad mood, you can be in a bad mood. If you don't, you're the only one that can change it. So whatever everybody else is saying about how to create that happiness for yourself, they just don't know. Like they just don't know, and you know. So kind of makes sense to kind of go your own path.
Yeah, definitely great there, and it all worked out for you at this point.
A lot of luck. A lot of luck is still, and we'll see. We'll see if it keeps still working out.
The mark of America. It's working out for you. So we got to ask you a few betting questions, of course.
Okay.
Not that you're not going to talk betting later today, of course, on Audacy, but
only for 4 hours later.
Only 4 hours.
Yeah, only like 22 hours a week. It's all right. No problem.
So Joe and I, we do some other shows. We do some live shows on other platforms, the Halftime Sports app and whatnot. And there's a lot of discussion with the NFL MVP. So to me, it's going to, in our opinions, it's going to come down to most likely Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, or Tom Brady. And then right behind them is Herbert and Josh Allen. If you're looking at this, do you just bet the favorite for MVP here, or are you taking Tom Brady because if he throws 45 touchdowns, he's probably going to win the MVP, and he's probably has a little further odds back at this point?
Yeah, I think this is like the most interesting NFL MVP race we've had in a really long time. Usually there's, even at this point in the season, was it week 7 basically? We played 6 games already. There's usually like 3 candidates, 4 candidates maybe at this point. You feel really good that it's probably one of 2, but okay, maybe somebody can emerge, but you really kind of know. So last year it would have been like, all right, well, it's Mahomes. And then week 5, week 6, you're like, well, it could be Rodgers, could be 1 or 2 other guys. And then the 2 of them kind of just take you to the finish line, basically. Like it really wasn't ever going to be more than a couple of those guys. I feel like 9 people could probably win this year. And it's really funny that we're at this point in the season, but you look at the number 1 predictor, well, there are 2, because one's very obvious. There are 2 predictors, obviously, of who's going to win MVP. One is statistically you have to have an awesome season. I think that's like the really obvious one that I wasn't going to mention. But 2 is team success is way more important, maybe than even casual bettors give it credit for. It's typically like the number 1 seed in the conference or the number 2 seed produces the MVP winner. There's a couple examples historically of a team that's been a 4 or 5 seed, one of Peyton Manning's MVPs. They were the wild card. They were also 12-4, I think, when he won it, but they were the wild card. They didn't win the division. It has to be this insane regular season record coupled with the accomplishment statistically. Okay, so if that's true, we can also approach this question in terms of who are the teams that are most likely to be the 1 seed, to be 15-2 at the end of the year, to be 16-1, if possible. Everyone's going to immediately be like, well, Arizona doesn't have a loss. Like probably them. The fact that Kyler Murray is already dealing with an injury and that this was something he was basically unable to make it through a season last year without having a pretty serious injury that really hurt him at the end of the year, maybe prevented them from making the playoffs. The idea that he's already there physically would concern me a lot if I was going to bet him to win MVP, even though they don't have a loss yet. So it's like, all right, if I'm kicking Kyler out because he's already very low priced and now he sustained an injury, okay, maybe I'm out on him. Who would be the other teams that would be the most likely to have this insane regular season record? I think the 2 that stand out immediately are Buffalo and Tampa Bay. So Buffalo, even if people don't think Josh Allen is as good of a candidate as some of the other people, they play by far the easiest schedule the rest of the season. They're going to be favored by more than a touchdown, I think, in all but 1 of the games that they have. I mean, it's really crazy when you see it play out and you simulate the season. They just win all these games. I mean, even though they lost to Tennessee, that's like one of the closest projected spreads they're going to have the entire rest of the year. So if they're going to be the 1, okay, like we at least have to consider the possibility that he can win. And then my pick the entire time has been Brady. I still think Tampa is like uniquely positioned to not only be the 1 seed in the NFC more often than basically everybody else, but that he is going to have an insane statistical season that's going to accompany that. It's very unlikely he's going to miss any games with injury. Yes, he had this like finger thing, but then he also played very well against Philadelphia in a game that didn't have to throw very much. But like, I think the coupling of those 2 things, team success with player success, it was Nick and I both liked Brady before the year. The prices obviously come down a little bit. I still think he is the most likely player to win, even though I think there are a lot of other really interesting candidates.
Now I know it's truly a quarterback award, and his extra game. But if Derrick Henry breaks the single season rushing record, does he have any shot to win MVP?
Yes, definitely. I said there were like 9 players who I thought could win, and in that group is 100% him. It's the quarterbacks that you mentioned, 6 or 7 of them basically, and then him. And it's just like my only thing is, how many games is Tennessee going to win? Like, is it if they're 11 and 6?
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that contingent on them winning the division title? Because it seems like they're head and shoulders the best team in that division, unless the Colts figure out a way to win 3, 4, 5 games in a row here and kind of get back into the mix a little bit. But let's say Tennessee finishes 10-7, and that's good enough to win the South because the next best team has 7 wins. Right at that point, even if he breaks the record and has all these terrific statistical accolades for this season that you could put next to that. Is that better than putting him beside Brady and Josh Allen and Lamar, especially if the Ravens win 13 games and they win the AFC North, which is a better division? Like, how do you weigh that? How do you weigh the division factor and the schedule factor next to the stats and stuff?
Right. I think the most important thing in that situation is to take the third element that we're not talking about. So we have like player and team and stats. Those are the 3 that we have. And then price would obviously be the other one. So like, cat's out of the bag on Derrick Henry. That's the problem. So like you would like to believe that he's this big long shot, except that because of the game that he had on Monday night and a couple other games he's had this season, like his price is now, plummeted to the point that sure, he's after the guys that we're talking about, but like he's not really like a true like 50-1 kind of like 20, like 40-1 long shot. I feel like that's the kind of price you would still need to take a guy that plays for a team that's probably going to win like 10 or 11 games this year. It's just, can Tennessee have the type of season that produces an MVP candidate? Probably not. So if they can't, his season has to be so insane statistically to overcome the fact that they're going to be like 11 and 6 and Tampa's going to be 16 and 1 and Brady's going to have 40 touchdowns. Like, can it overcome that? Sure. Of course it can. Like, because all things are possible. Derrick Henry could break all records by 500 yards. That could still happen this season. But it might take something like that for him to win. So do you really want to bet the current prices in the market? And I haven't checked like the last couple of days, but I'm going to guess, it's a string of quarterbacks somewhere from like 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 to 1. And then he's right after them. Basically, I'm going to guess that's how it's still kind of laid out in the market. If the price has already dropped that much, think about what you need to happen for him to win. Is that really a worthwhile bet? Would you rather bet, Brady 6-7, who is going to win 14 games on average a lot of the time? He's in the conversation immediately. You don't even need that miraculous help. Or do you want to bet a guy 15-1 that literally has to break an NFL record in order to win the award? It just makes it tough. Doesn't mean he can't win, but just comparison of price and stuff would probably lead me to pick other guys.
All right, real quick here, Super Bowl in the AFC. Are you believing in the Ravens here? Because to me, I think the safe bet, you still got to pick the Bills to go to the Super Bowl, because if they get the 1 seed and the division's very weak, I think it's going to be tough for a lot of teams to come through Buffalo in late January. And then the NFC, I mean, it's really tough to handicap. I think, do you just wait and see who gets the 1 seed? Because I think that bye and the home field advantage throughout is going to be super important in the NFC this year.
Yeah, I'll do the NFC first. It's funny, like it's like, oh, sports betting expert, whatever. I actually don't think about this topic a lot. It's really funny, like who's going to win the Super Bowl or like bet it, because it's only one market, right? And it's usually the good teams are all priced all the way, like as the favorites, like Buffalo, Kansas City, Tampa Bay. So it's unlikely you would find a valuable bet. Like we all know who the awesome teams are, right? You just listed off all of them there. I agree with you that those teams are all really good. So from a betting standpoint, it's kind of funny, like, like who would I bet on right now? I don't know. Like I can just tell you in each conference, I think Tampa is the most likely team to be the 1 seed in the NFC.
Okay.
Cool. Could it be the Rams, who obviously beat them head to head? Sure. Could it be the Cardinals? Sure. Packers, Dallas. You have this group of elite teams right behind them. I still think Tampa is most likely to have the best regular season record of those teams. And I'm not saying they're going to like run through them in the playoffs or anything, but I still think they're the most likely. Market thinks so too. That makes it pretty tough. Okay, maybe there's not really a valuable bet there. AFC is really interesting because you kind of have to figure out when you get to the playoffs and when the Chiefs inevitably make it, how are you treating them as a known quantity at that time? Like this isn't October 21st, it's January 30th, and actually, or 23rd, whatever. The Super Bowl's later this year. It's the day before Valentine's Day, by the way, which is just, there's a lot of jokes to be made there, and we can make them all when we get to that point. But like the idea of you're in the playoffs, Okay, Chiefs are probably going to have to go on the road at this point, unless they win probably every game the rest of the season, which is possible. Okay, so it's Kansas City at Baltimore in divisional. It's Kansas City at Buffalo, AFC Championship game. They might even be a dog in, well, they're probably not a dog in the first game. They're definitely a dog in the second game, probably like Bills 2.5, something like that. What would you do? Like, do you really hate the Chiefs enough that you're still not going to bet Mahomes in every key situation that comes up in the postseason? That's kind of, I think, the tough part. Buffalo has the easiest schedule left. They are very likely, I think, to be the one at this point. But does that make you think in that exact game, do you really want them? Even though they just won on Sunday Night Football a couple weeks ago, do you really want them against like Mahomes and that coaching staff? I don't. So like my thing has always been like, maybe look for a buy point on Kansas City or just wait. And like now Kansas City's going to be in these road situations, probably in the playoffs. Bet them then. Like it's an interesting dynamic. Like, does winning a ton of games right now matter that much when Mahomes is the guy that you have to face, or when Brady is the guy that you have to face? That was true last year when he went on the road and beat all those teams. Who would you really actually want, even if they didn't win as many games as the Packers or as Buffalo or teams that we're talking about?
All great points. And we wanted to start wrapping this up here. What we're going to do is,
I told too many stories, right? Did I tell a lot of stories?
No, you told amazing stories. A lot of really great stories.
Okay, thanks. Yes.
No, you were a blast. But as of this recording, the NBA season has literally just started, so we could get this in as well. I'm not going to ask you. I think it's plotting to ask, who team you like to win the conference and final.
Golden State.
I tell you, those Nets are pretty good. They might be going places this
Durant
year.
for MVP, Ken?
I do. I like MVP. I mean, winner of the league is probably one of the NBA is the most predictable sport on earth. It's probably one of the teams we all think are really good, which is probably Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Lakers, maybe like Phoenix, Utah, but probably not something like that.
You don't think the Warriors got a shot to get back? With the
I think there's a version of the Warriors when everything breaks perfectly where they're in that tier. They're definitely not above those teams, even the perfect version of them. Clay comes back, looks amazing. Wiggins actually loses weight and cares about playing basketball. All of these things have to happen. Jordan Poole actually night to night can be that guy who gives you that third scoring option. All of those things happen. They're kind of alongside. I still have them probably behind Brooklyn and Philly if that happens, or Brooklyn and Milwaukee rather, if that happens. But like, yeah, could they win the West? Maybe.
They should try to get Ben Simmons. Swap him for Wiggins.
Yeah. Should they get Ben Simmons? Is that something that should happen? I don't think any team thinks they should get Ben Simmons. Actually, there's probably. I mean, all this is based on just like betting on a future, betting on a Super Bowl thing. It's all based on price.
Right.
If you can get Ben Simmons for a first, sure, take Ben, like, no problem. If it's, hey, we need like, your best player, 3 firsts and 2 pick swaps, then like,
no.
Click, and I think it's been a lot of click so far with Daryl Morey trying to arrange those deals. Like and it only gets more toxic and he only gets more poisonous, which means the price only goes down, which means no trade happens. It's like a Chinese finger trap, basically. Like the more you resist, you actually end up completely unable to escape. Crazy. So yeah, I mean, conferences I don't think are that interesting. Milwaukee, I guess, is just as likely as Brooklyn to win the East, but there's probably a version of Brooklyn that's better. West is more wide open, but it's still only like 3 teams probably that could actually maybe end up getting out at the end. MVP is a little interesting, just real quick. Usually the strongest predictor is you have to be kind of on a career arc where you have finished in the running to win MVP in a previous season. So I think it's like the last 35 years, all but 2 players were in the top 8 of MVP voting the year before they won. So you basically just never come out of nowhere and win, ever. Like, just never happens. Derrick Rose and Steve Nash, I think, were the only 2 people that have ever done that. And those were unique situations. Rose had the craziest early career of all time, and Nash switched teams to like what ended up being a dominant team for a couple of years. With that in mind, you kind of look at the previous voting. Luka's the favorite. I don't think Dallas is going to be that good this year because I think Jason Kidd's one of the worst coaches in the league.
Agreed.
So like they'll win 45
Look how good the
games.
Bucks got once he left.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then
and
it's not just, you're not going from JB Bickerstaff to Jason Kidd. You're going from Rick Carlisle to Jason Kidd.
Right.
Like
Rick Carlisle is going
from
to be
a savant to
future Hall of Fame coach to Jason Kidd.
Right, to a guy who like wears hilarious warm-up jackets. Like it's just there's just
Right.
drop off here. It's just staggering. So I think Luke will be awesome. I think the team will win like 45, 47 games, and he'll come in third. Like it'll just be
Right.
it just again, team success usually a really strong predictor of who can produce an MVP. The price that I like the most, a lot of people like Giannis, and I can't get there because I still don't know if he can actually win another one. Everybody loves him now, and so that's changed, and the team has had playoff success, and that's changed. But usually guys have arcs. And when the arc ends and you don't win anymore, you don't just come back and win again. It just never happens. It's basically like LeBron or Jordan. Like that's like the arc, and Jordan for really obvious reasons. That's it. Like Shaq won his, and then he should have won like two more and didn't. And like Kobe had his arc, and like Durant's kind of had his arc, and Curry had his arc, and he probably can't get it. It's always whatever the new thing is. What's the new thing? That's usually the guy who wins. It's going to be Luka eventually, and I just don't think it's this year. I think it's Embiid. I actually think that's the one that makes the most sense. Like, I think there's a version of this season that plays out where it's like Simmons gets traded or quits or doesn't sit there and like, oh, well, like without him, Embiid's been on this crazy run and he's like doing all these things. Yes. Could he miss 25 games? Absolutely. That torpedoes the bet immediately, but he's finished an MVP consideration before. He was probably the winner last year if everybody plays a full season. So that's LeBron, him, Davis, all these guys play a full one. The straw poll was basically he was going to win at January, February. So he's kind of been there already. They're set up to obviously be a pretty good team in the East. I think that would be my bet right now if I had to bet on someone.
That's interesting. No, nothing for Joker, huh?
Well, I bet on him a ton second half of last season because they kept not moving the prices. It became so apparent that he was going to win. And on the show, we came back from break one time and I go, hey, like, I just want to spend the segment talking about this. Am I insane? And I just started going through this case of like, he was like even money. This was the night that Harden had a huge game and said he was the MVP. If anybody remembers when that happened, it was in February, I believe. So like Harden has this monster game for the Nets. And he's like, I am the MVP. And I'm like, no, you're not the MVP. And like, nobody's going to vote for you. So the market was basically like Luka and Curry were kind of still long shots, but it was Embiid and LeBron were still like second and third choice. And they were both hurt. They weren't going to return for a long time. And it was Jokic and then Harden. And that's it. And I was like, wait a minute. Like two guys aren't going to play anymore. Harden can't win. This is the only guy that's left and he's even money. Like, let's bet a lot of money on this. And we did. And then the price kept going up and up and up and up. And that ended up being one of the calls that we actually got right. That was good.
That was awesome. Is there any other NBA futures bet that you're particularly married to? Something that's kind of maybe a little off the radar that nobody would expect?
Off the radar? Probably not, honestly. Like, I think the NBA, like I said, it's such a predictable sport in terms of like who's going to be there at the end and who wins this stuff. Like, I think Embiid is the most like contrarian opinion that I have, and he's like fourth choice to win the award. So I don't know if that's really true. So unfortunately, I don't have any like hidden gems for you there.
You got any odds on New York Mets manager?
Ooh, is there a market open on that? That's really interesting. I wonder what the Yankees market would have been.
Hired the general manager.
If you would have opened a market the day after then we probably had after this. But if you asked me about prop markets, I could probably just go all day. If there was a market after the wild card game for who the Yankees manager would be next year, or just will Aaron Boone be the manager of the Yankees game one the following season? Yes, no. Like, what do you think the odds would have been of that happening?
Yes, would have been minus 170-ish, I think.
Right. Yes would have been a favorite, right?
Yes would have been the favorite because of Cashman.
Right. And like everyone, like Nick's all bent out of shape. My co-host, everyone's mad that he's like coming back, and I'm like, if you kind of like read the tea leaves, it's like he was just going to come back, and everyone was going to be mad.
Yeah, with the way they construct the lines, you think Vegas listens to what Yankees fans say on Twitter, or what the overall body of work of Brian Cashman for 20 plus years has been?
Sure. Well, the good news is for Vegas is they're taking like $20 max on that market probably. So they take a couple $20 bets on yes. That price is skyrocketing, and you're not going to be able to get any yes anymore.
Yep. Ken, this was a lot of fun. Thanks again for doing this with us. I consider you and Casas like OGs of this stuff. I think everybody's kind of slowly following in, but you guys, I think, I don't want to say you guys are my favorites because I have a lot of other friends who do this, but you guys are super entertaining. Okay. Love listening to your show. Love watching your show. But what we do here is we always give our guests the last word. So if there's anything else you would like to share, promote on top of stuff you already have, please, by all means, go ahead. thank you again for doing this with us again. We really
No, thank you
appreciate
guys.
it.
Appreciate you having me. EB did a great job promoting the show earlier. You Better You Bet 3 to 7, Audacy, YouTube, Twitch. We're on now, all that kind of stuff. Podcast afterwards, just search You Better You Bet. And then the last thing would just be, if people heard that interview and they're like, oh, I'm thinking about taking that leap, think about doing that, taking that side hustle and make it like my advice is always go for it. As long as you're not like in financial super danger from doing it and you're kind of in between and you just need that push, like hopefully this interview is the push, go do it. And I guarantee in almost all situations, there will be no regret.
There you have it. Great words of advice there by Ken. And that's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. So far, a very special guest, Ken Barkley, and my co-host, Joe Calabrese. I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.